In reading Luke's account of the birth of Jesus and the finding of the family in the stable by the shepherds, caused me really to think about what family is. In Luke 2:16-21 describes a nuclear family with an unusual future ahead of them. Joseph's struggle with Mary's pregnancy and Mary's somewhat hesitant acceptance of the messenger Gabriel's message provides a template for all of us to accept, even unwillingly, God's plan for us, despite our own somewhat selfish personal plans. Joseph and Mary provide examples of the care and love which families should express for one another. Aware of God's presence in all things, Joseph and Mary followed the law of Moses as good Jews in presenting their son to the Lord in 8 days after his birth. What a shock for them when Simeon's words, foretelling the tough days ahead. To protect his family, Joseph was forced by Herod's cruelty to become a migrant, to a refugee in Egypt. Joseph and Mary celebrated the feast occasions of the law as a family, attending temple, going to Jerusalem at Passover, giving rise to at least one occasion of worry when Jesus was not with the group when the group was on the way back to Nazareth because he was missing. So the family had to look for him in the temple. And the temple was a very large structure, huge. They had to look for him for a long time. They found him, but families worry about one another. That's what families do. So families include more than the nuclear members. We're aware of many families which welcome other members due to circumstances and situations such as illness, loneliness, and especially close family ties. Now that Joseph and Mary had extended family is a given. Joseph returned to Bethlehem for the census. Surely he had relatives there. That's where he was from. Now Mary had one relative mentioned in the gospel, Elizabeth, and she was the mother of John the Baptizer. Now he was a cousin of Jesus. Now some extended members of the family appear here and there in the gospel accounts. John's birth, his mission proclaiming the coming of the Messiah, his baptism of Jesus, and the death of John the Baptist. Now the brothers and sisters in Nazareth, who are named in Matthew 3, they were worried about Jesus and the danger he was in when teaching in his hometown. And people said, well, he's crazy. So they went there. Now, brothers and sisters. Now, it was common in those days for close relatives, especially cousins, to be called brothers and sisters. Now, if you look in the Old Testament, in Tobit, Tobiah, when he was on a journey for his father, he met Sarah and he fell in love with her. And he said, I want to marry my sister. Now, this wasn't his natural sister. This was his sister in the Lord because she was also a Jew. She was some kind of a distant relative. But they married and she wasn't his sister. Now, Jesus was the only child in this nuclear family, in this holy family. It was evident, but in his very last utterance on the cross, when he gave Mary to John the Apostle, whom he loved. And he assigned to John the care of Mary. Because in those days, if you were a widow and had no one to look after you, no son, you were at the bottom of the heap. You had no rights, no nothing. You lost your property. Whatever you could beg is what you could get. Now the gospel refers many times to widows, poor widows, why Jesus looked after his mother. Now if he had other brothers, as mentioned in Matthew, calling them brothers, they would look after her, but obviously he didn't have anybody else, and it was John who had that care. A family model which was and is truly holy is, for all generations, something to aspire to, regardless of the makeup of our own family. We know that some families today are certainly not nuclear, in the same sense as the family of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus was. Now, Pope Francis has mentioned many times how we have to, as a church family, we have to reach out to people who are in unusual family situations and not shut them out, but welcome them and love them and help them through the difficulties which they might have. All families are called to holiness, to be faithful through all trials, to love and care for each other until death, to celebrate God as an integral part of family. These make a family as the Holy Family was holy. So we pray that the blessings open to all families will be prayed for and they will be granted. Amen.